For the first time in just over 10 years, ladies and gentlemen, we have a new Lord of the Rings film in cinemas. That's right, Middle Earth is back. And it's back in a very mixed way. Because The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim, though constantly marketed in the last few months as a Lord of the Rings movie, and, them using every single opportunity to tell us how Peter Jackson is working on it, is unfortunately not on the level of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. Which I mean is to be expected. Very few pieces of media in the history of cinema, back dating from the 2000s when The Lord of the Rings came out, much less the Middle Earth franchise, have been able to live up to the greatness that is the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So when The War of the Rohirrim was announced and I went to cinemas, of course I went in, slightly skeptical, but cautiously optimistic. And I will say, I wasn't wholly disappointed. Sure, it wasn't anything massively special, but overall, it was a decent film. It was hugely enjoyable within some battle scenes, and the music hits in all the right spots. I tell you, that moment when the Rohan theme starts playing as you see the kingdom of Rohan for the first time, that was truly magical, and is definitely one of the best things about this film. And it's a combination of what I would best describe as nostalgia. Of course, it is. It's nostalgia from when you were a kid and you first saw Rohan for the first time and heard that brilliant music, and maybe some easy fan service by using names like Gandalf and Mordor to draw more casual viewers in. It definitely helps with the Roar the Rohirrim, but then unfortunately, it simultaneously hinders it. And the reason I say that is because the film is constantly trying to include little member berries and just trying to replicate the originals as much as possible. For example, probably the most obvious one of this is Edoras. The design is pretty much exactly the same as the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Helm's speech as well to his men is quite similar to Théoden's, and the dynamic and story of Hera and her brothers also sort of reflects Eowyn, Eomer, and Theodred in a way. This isn't necessarily terrible, and it doesn't make the movie unwatchable, but similar to another movie I know, Gladiator 2, which for the most part I enjoyed, it gets so caught up in trying to replicate the original that it doesn't try to tell its own story, and it essentially just becomes a worse version of the original. But looking elsewhere then, Hera as the protagonist was obviously highly debated online. Some people did not like that, with, the usual crowd of anti-woke YouTubers absolutely blasting the War of the Rohirrim without actually watching it. But for me, she honestly was not that bad as the protagonist. Sure, the film could have benefited heavily from having Helm Hammerhand be the main protagonist, considering the fact that he is admittedly a much more interesting character as a whole. Also, could have got other people who just decide to hate on this movie for its lead being a female to, maybe give it a chance. But hey, just leave them to their hating and let us enjoy Lord of the Rings content. So yeah, Hera wasn't my first choice to be the main protagonist, and I definitely think the movie proved that. Because whilst Hera wasn't necessarily a bad character, every single one of Helm's scenes was so much more fun than Hera, and that's just unfortunate, but it is what it is. Helm killing Frecker, him leading his army into battle, his sacrifice to save his daughter, it's all such great stuff that does undoubtedly keep the War of the Rohirrim afloat. Because I have to say that there were times when it really, really, really dragged. Especially in the middle of the film, I genuinely actually wanted to go to sleep. I think from the moment Hera and the civilians of Rohan got into the Hornburg, their pace just dropped significantly, and the good start seemed to be kind of forgotten. Because, yeah, I had to soldier through the middle of that film. It was not easy. But I do think that it was worth it in the end because the final act was pretty fun. The final battle, the Wolf and Hera showdown, it was for the most part top notch entertainment, if maybe a little predictable at times. But one gripe I really need to share, though, although I don't think I've seen a single YouTube video talking about the war hero that hasn't mentioned this, is the animation. Because, yeah, it's not the best, is it? A Lord of the Rings movie in an anime style was pretty bold to begin with, considering the fact that the only animated Lord of the Rings we've got was the 1978 film, which wasn't amazing. And that problem obviously became apparent straight away because the animation was nothing special in this film. In fact, there were moments when it was just downright terrible. If you watched the last video I did actually on me starting anime, one problem I had with the genre as a whole was the animation. Coming off shows like Arcane, Secret Level, and more, it's definitely hard to get grips with this animation. And there are moments when the issues are very, very obvious, which does unfortunately take you, or at least me, out of the film a little. Overall, though, the War of the Rohirrim is just such a mixed bag. Hera, though, I do like her fight scenes and the idea of her wanting to be free and her deciding to forsake queenship, forget about being a queen. I did quite like that, but she's still a weak lead in all honesty. And it's even more disappointing when you realize just how many other characters could have been the main character and could have been a whole lot more interesting. Freyolaf, who does become king, is one such example. He's a brilliant character because I was immediately drawn in by him, his willingness to fight for his king and serve his country even after being banished. Helm, for reasons I think we all know, would obviously be a good main character. Heck, even one of Hera's brothers, Halathahama, could have been such good main protagonists. But of course, that role ends up with Hera, who I won't criticise for the whole woke female boss thing, girl boss thing. It's just a waste of time. But yeah, Hera did not need to be the lead of this film. And another big problem for me was it was just the predictability of it all. It was just so painfully obvious what was going to happen and when, and it really does take the sting out of your movie when the War of the Rohirrim is set 200 years before the Lord of the Rings, and we know that Rohan continues to live and prosper despite whatever happens in this film. So that is definitely an issue. So in a way, the War of the Rohirrim is hampered by what is based on what it's a spin-off of. Looking then at something else, the villain Wolf, and this is where another issue comes in for me because Wolf, simply put, just isn't that good of a villain. Show how he refuses to give up, essentially sacrificing his man's life. He is very evil-like, but other than that, there is really just nothing interesting about him to me, or at all in the least way scary. He's just another villain with absolutely nothing interesting about him, except for the fact that he has a background with Hera. Even that I thought was a bit weird, and then him wanting to marry her. I mean, yeah, I guess it worked, but overall, Wolf is just not a strong main character, and sorry, as a main villain. And definitely his father Freckle was definitely a much more interesting character. He definitely seemed more evil-like, and you wanted him to die, which of course he did. But Wolf, I don't know, it just didn't work as well. One reason for this is that his main motives are that Helm Hammerhand killed his father. But, I mean, his father was being a bit of a dick anyways, wasn't he? I mean, he kind of had it coming to him, and I think Wolf knew that as well. So that's just another thing that adds to this issue of Wolf just not being a scary character. And coupled in with the fact that, of course, we know what happened to Rohan in the past, as I mentioned, it creates for a really low-stakes kind of film. So the ending, really, there is no tension to it when Wolf eventually gets defeated. You're like, well, I knew that was going to happen because we know that Rohan goes on to prosper. And it just seems that, well, Hera's not going to lose, is she? It's just a very predictable film, and it creates for a very, very low stakes movie, which definitely had me falling asleep because I'll tell you what, I did go to watch this film at like 10 o'clock at night. There was no other timing that I could make. I had to go at 10 o'clock at night with like 5 other people in the theatre, and I definitely did want to fall asleep and, leave at some point as well in the middle act. But like I said, there are some really, really good things in this film. The fight scenes are excellent. There's one scene where Haleth, the brother, gets an arrow straight through his neck and gets killed. I thought that was brilliant stuff. We definitely needed a bit more violence in this film, if that makes sense. But overall, I mean, the film is just, like I said, hampered with the past, and yeah, it's just a very low stakes movie. Overall, I was very excited for The War of the Rohirrim. It was probably the one film that I was looking forward to most in the latter end of this year, except for maybe Gladiator 2. And it has kind of disappointed. I wouldn't say that it's as terrible a movie as everyone is going at it for. I think it was pretty mid in the end. There was some really good stuff. There was some okayish stuff. I guess Hera, again, really shouldn't have been the main protagonist in this, but it's not a deal breaker for me. Overall, I'd give it, it's a solid 6 out of 10. It's not a terrible movie. It's not an amazing one either. By no stretch of the imaginations is it living up to the hype of, the Lord of the Rings or even the Hobbit films. I don't think it lives up to them, but it's better than Rings of Power. And that is something. Well, actually, the bar is really low, so I don't even know if that is anything. But overall, yes, I'd give the War of the Rohirrim maybe a 6.5 or a 7 out of 10. Overall, it's enjoyable, but, it's not a necessity. Anyways, that is the end of today's video. Thanks for watching. If you did enjoy, make sure to subscribe because I will definitely be doing more Lord of the Rings content in the future. So if you want to see more of that, make sure to subscribe. Maybe you'd get some worth out of it. Also, make sure to comment down below what you thought of the War of the Rohirrim and certain points I talked about in this video. And yeah, that's going to end off things for today. Thanks for watching. Darth Sauron, out.